If I come up right now and do a file save, that just overwrote the existing file. And because it was already created, it's not going to ask me to overwrite it. Now, if I was to do a file save as, it's going to say, okay, you want to rename this or make a backup. And at this point, I may say, you know what? I need to make this work in 2013 for whatever reason. So I'm going to probably go ahead and put the 2013 under there. And when I save, if I saved right now, it would make it a 2014 format because that's the software I'm using. But I also have a pull down here that lets me go back and choose the past 3 years that I've actually, the releases that are probably still available out for people that may not be working with 64-bit systems and whatnot. So if I said, okay, I'm going to choose 2013, now I hit save, and I have 2 copies. I still have the original out there, which was just called File Example. That, of course, is a 2014 format. And then I have this one that I've saved as a 2013. Now, if I go back up here right now and do a file save, what do you think is it doing? Is it reopening? And let's do this. Let's make this a little easier here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to manipulate this text just so I can, this is a 2013 3ds Max file. So let's see how this works. We're going to go ahead and do a file save. Now, I originally told it that I wanted it to be a 2013 file, but when I go out, I'm going to do a file open. I come out and I choose file example here, and I hit open. You'll notice that it automatically reverted back to saving as the original file. Don't get misled here. Every time you save in a lower format, you have to do a save as in order for that to acknowledge the 2013 format. Just keep that in the back of your mind if you're working with different versions. All right, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this text once again. We're going to talk about text here. I'm going to put, this is an exported file. And that's going to be a .3ds. That's the first one I'm going to show you here. A .3ds was a 3D model scene. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a file export. Now when I do file export, the default now is an Autodesk FBX. That file format was actually created to integrate between Maya and the various other Autodesk products. But I'm going to tell you to do a 3D Studio. And the reason why is when you go searching models out on the internet, you'll find a lot of them in a .3ds mode. And here's the good news about that. I'll go ahead and put file export. The good news about that is it doesn't matter what version of Max it was created with. That file will open in any version of Max. So there's another way to get an old version of a project into a new. Now, file export has limitations. It will keep the texture coordinates, and in some cases it'll export out the actual materials, but it's going to lose the history pretty much of anything you've done. Like for here, I've extruded this text. You're going to lose that. So I just exported this file, and if you go out on the desktop, you're going to see I have a white icon that says a .3ds. So I'm going to go ahead back into Max real quick. I'm going to go to File Reset, just to wipe everything out here. No, I don't want to save this. Yes, I want to reset. I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to navigate to my desktop where that file was, and you'll notice that it's sitting there as an option for me. But you don't see the Max files. You can't import a Max file this way. So it's not going to give you that option. Yes, I want to merge it with the scene, and here we go. Now what I have here is text. I go back to modify, but you'll notice it's no longer extruded text, it's editable mesh. Now, I know we haven't talked about this yet. We're going to look at that in the future, but pretty much the history of how we made that object is gone, and now it's simply just a mesh. And there's a limitation of working with .3ds models. However, it's really important if you want to go out and find models on the web that you can import them in if they're in the 3ds form. Now, I also said the FBX, and the FBX works very similar. So I'm not going to demonstrate that in this lesson because we're already running well over our time slot that I'd like to allot. But how do we merge two projects together? Well, first we have to open one. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll just draw a box here just for the heck of it, just so you see what's going on. And I'm going to import or merge another Max file into this one. So when I do that, I go to File, Import, Merge. Now it's asking me to choose another Max file. And I'll go out and grab my file example, hit Open. And here we get the merge file example. Now, people get confused because if you just hit OK right now, nothing happens. You actually have to select the objects from the other scene and tell them which ones are coming in. Now you can filter. Maybe you don't want to bring the lights in, or maybe you don't want to bring the cameras in, or even the helpers for whatever reason. You can filter those out. Now I'm just bringing in one file of a piece of text. If this was a very large file, I would have a long list of items, and I would have to decide what I want to bring in. Pretty much, if I do want to merge everything, I just select all and hit OK. Now I have two different files merged together in the same. Now there's one other thing that hasn't happened here, but I want you to be very aware of, and that is the name of a file. And we're going to talk about naming files a little bit here, or naming your actual assets or your objects. For instance, this is called, if I hit modify, it's called text001, and this is called box001. If for some reason I had two pieces of text and they were both called text001, it would ask me to rename that object so that they don't overwrite each other. That's very important. You must accept that. You must go in and say yes, automatically overwrite the file names. Let's try that again. We'll go to File, Import, Merge, and I'm going to bring the same file in again. I'm going to select all, hit OK, and this time it's going to say text001 already has a name in the scene. So you could choose to make that different, or you can just apply to all the duplicates and hit auto rename. It will automatically generate a new name based off the hierarchy of that file name. For instance, text002. So now there are two pieces of text, but they have two different names. Your assets in your scene cannot have the same name. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so far I've talked about opening, saving. To close a Max file, we could go up here to File, all right, and just come down to the Exit Max. That will close Max out. It'll ask you to save before you close. We can also hit the red X, which I'm not going to do right now because I want to keep proceeding on in this video. But closing this down, it's also going to ask you, do you want to save any changes before we close? Be patient. If you hit save, don't close it immediately, because if it's in the middle of a save, it may crash. We don't want to lose our work. We also talked about importing and exporting the 3DS models. I showed you briefly how to merge. Now I'm just going to spend one more minute here on proper file management techniques here. And that, of course, goes back into when you do a save as, make sure you're saving to the desktop. Make sure you're saving it in a folder, because later you're going to be adding some additional files to there, maybe a backup. Save often. Save every 5 minutes at least. There is an auto-save feature here, and I do want to show that to you. If you go to Customize, and you go to Preferences, there's a tab here for files, and it's going to ask you about auto backup. If you turn on Enable, it will create an auto backup file. Unfortunately, this becomes kind of a pain because, one, it doesn't really ask you where you're going to save. It's kind of putting it in this virtual folder somewhere, which I've never been able to locate. But more importantly is it kind of freezes you up while you're working. And I would rather you hit save when you feel you're in the need of that, as opposed to relying on this. The bigger projects, it'll freeze every time it goes to save. So that's just an option for you. You may want to turn that off, or you may want to keep it on just for safety reasons. So there's much more to learn about file management, but I'll leave that to our future projects that we're going to be looking at, and I'll kind of go in a little bit more when we talk about our actual projects on saving them and saving copies and seeing various versions of it for just safety reasons. Okay. One last thing, which is very important to know, I've said this a couple times already, but do not save to an external drive directly. By doing that, one, you're only transferring the information as fast as USB will allow it. But two, if you're in the process of saving and that drive is pulled out halfway through, you lose the file. It's best practice to save it to the exact hard drive on your computer and then make a copy to the external drive, as opposed to just dragging it over. That way, if something happens to the external drive, you still have the backup on the computer you're working on. Again, it's better to have more files than you need than to only have one and lose it. But it's also important to name them appropriately with various revision numbers or backup so that you don't overwrite a file when you're trying to make an additional copy. We'll see you in the next video.